my best instance of that happening was when I was dating Denise. We pulled up to go to the movies, and as I got out, I had an old 69 Chevy Nova, 3 on the floor, and the tire was going sss. So I said, I guess we'll change the tire after the movie, because we didn't have time to do it then. We're going to the movie. And I happened to meet my dad coming out of the movie. My mom and dad. So I came out of the movie, I had a spare tire on there. That's the way to have a flat tire right there. Well, glad everybody's here tonight. Denise was coming down the stairs to come, and she got sick. So, and I did not fix dinner, so it's all on her. I think maybe we had salmon tonight, so I think maybe it turned on her or something. But I mean, she was dressed walking down the stairs and went, I don't think I can go. So I'll get home, and if she calls needing me because I'm not answering my phone, you know what to do. Jeff will take over, and I'll go home and take care of her.
Class dismissed.
Perfect. I like it. It's good to see tuna fish coming in the back door, getting in the box back there. So we no.
I thought you were calling Marshall tuna fish.
Well, I was, but I was going to allude to the other the big tuna. Yeah. I was hoping somebody would get that. Anybody else we need to update on or know about that? Josh Grimm's dad, his surgery went well, and he's doing great. Lynette.
My mom has lost 2 close friends in the last week. Very suddenly, one was a tractor accident,
Oh, no.
and the other one, I'm not quite sure what happened, but it was one of her best friends.
Yeah.
And so it's hitting mom hard. And then my niece, Kimberly,
Mm-hmm.
was also very close with both of those people.
Okay.
And so this is like Kimberly's first year at college, and she's been hit with two big losses right off.
Right. That's hard.
Can't always come home. She's trying to figure out whether she can come home this weekend. But,
Right.
The one lady that died on Monday, I said on Facebook, one of the last things she did was Saturday, she and her granddaughter brought my mom food
Right.
because she was so worried about my mom.
Yeah. Those are the kind of friends you want to have, right? Yeah. Worried about you more than maybe what's happening with them. That's good. Okay. We'll remember your mom as well. Any other updates? Well, let's begin with one other thing. It is Jim's birthday, just in case you didn't know. We won't make you say how many, and we certainly won't put that many candles in one place, right? Right. You just have to light one. They're so close together on the cake that, right? Then we got to call Jim in to get this fire out. So, yeah, we won't do that. Well, let's pray together. Father, we come to you, as always, with a grateful heart, giving thanksgiving to you for all that you provide. And we feel confident in coming and making requests of you. We want to be with Lynette's mom and give her additional comfort. She suffered loss this week and earlier in the year, and we just pray that you continue to comfort her and strengthen her. We're thankful to hear about Mr. Grimes and his surgery and his recovery, and we pray that he would continue to have strength and recover. Father, I pray that all those we don't know about who are in need of encouragement and need of strength, that you will provide somebody, a friend, or even a stranger, someone who just has an open and willing heart, open to your Spirit, to speak words of encouragement, to offer hands of help, and give hope to those who are in need. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're at the end of Mark 14. We're going to get out of 14 tonight, I hope. Barely. Get right into 15. You know what? I don't think we're going to make it out of 14. I don't want to get your hopes up. Sorry, Andy. I told him to call it more Mark 15, but we're not even going to get to 15. That's what they get for not being here, right? Mislabeled, and what in the world are they doing? Yeah, a little confusion always helps. But if you remember last week, Jesus had supper with his disciples. He had told them some things that were going to happen. Somebody was going to betray him, and they all said, "Not me, not me." And Peter, you remember his famous statement, going to come back into play tonight. I'll die with you before I'll leave you. I remind us of those things because I think one of the important things is just to try to put ourselves in their place and see the humanity of it. If you were thrust in this kind of intense, unprecedented situation, it's easy to look back after an event and say, "Oh, this is what I would have done." Now that you have all the facts and you're maybe removed from the emotion of the situation, our first reaction is not always what we would do after we've given it some thought and consideration or even understand more. So part of the challenge as we cover this familiar material is to find a way to see ourselves in their places. And the other challenge is to hear something maybe you haven't heard before. Because we can let the familiar, well, we already know that, and it doesn't penetrate like it could. Because there's so much to see. And again, we're going to have an unanswerable question here. And so we don't want it to sidetrack, but we do want it to spark the imagination, perhaps. So we're going to start in verse 43. Remember the disciples, they were falling asleep, and Jesus like, "Really? Just for a few minutes?" Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. So through the years, there's been a lot made of this kiss. I would entertain, would want any thoughts you've had or how it impacts you, or we've come to align it with betrayal when it's done in this manner. So what have been some of your thoughts about Judas and or what he was doing? His act was not unusual. Now, it would be unusual for us if, I gave you a kiss on the cheek when you walked in. We don't do that. We don't even shake hands anymore. You got to do elbows. But you understand, culturally it was different. But even more than that, that was a sign of respect from the student to the disciple. Okay? And so part of me, this leans in for me to this idea that Judas, maybe he was trying to get things started, right? He still saw Jesus as the Messiah, but the kind of Messiah he thought should come. The kind of Messiah that was going to lead a revolution against the Romans. That's not what's happening here. But I think that Judas's rabbi is not an ironic term for Judas. I think he did see him as teacher and believed, as I think the other apostles and disciples did, that this is, we're on the cusp of this happening. So it helps me understand Judas even more. And so I don't usually think of it in terms of he's doing something dastardly. He's just mistaken about what the effect of what he's doing will have. He thinks he can see beyond it, but he can't. The other part of this is, did they really need Judas to identify Jesus? If there was anybody known in Jerusalem going down the street, I'm going to think people went, oh, there's that guy from Galilee, right? Even if they've not spent time or listened to him. I get it. They didn't have Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, Instagram. That's probably Jim's favorite is Instagram, right? Yeah, okay. I didn't hear. Okay. But they knew who he was. So to me, it's also striking that this is just kind of a formality. But for me, I think one of the bigger questions is, why did Judas feel so strongly, think so strongly, act in this way? Because he thought he needed to help God out, right? If Jesus is Messiah, and maybe they saw him as Messiah, but not Son of God, maybe? Why would you need to help God out with his timing? And there have been plenty of people who said, God, you should be doing this. Why aren't? And people still today say, why do things happen this way? God should be doing this. Well, there's a bigger picture. There's something larger going on. We don't always see all the parts. I don't care who the president is. When people complain about some action they took as if they had all the information that I hope the president has, I don't feel qualified to make the same kind of conclusions that people from all sides make when something happens. I may have questions, but I don't think I have enough information to do that. And maybe that's part of the mistake on Judas's part here. Maybe they had removed themselves after basically hundreds of years of not seeing God move like the old stories talked about. We're now under this oppression and nothing's happening. It could be easy for them to think, it's on us. We got to do this. This is our closest shot. Let's get this going. Okay.
So are you saying that's just a speculation on your part? Do you think Judas thought, look, this isn't the guy we're looking for, and that kind of ticked him off, so I'm going to get rid of him so that the...
No, I think he thought it was the guy we're looking for. He just needs some help getting started. The spark for the revolution. When they come with clubs and swords, and there's no other way out, it's going to begin. Now, it certainly could also be the way he could have just been so discouraged. And we see how after this point, everybody treats him as the bad guy, right? The betrayer, he's the one. Well, I think part of that was we can call him bad and we can talk less about what we did. Right? We're good at that.
I think we can also look at Jesus' sinlessness
Right.
That sinlessness is even better than our best best.
No one would have batted an eye if Jesus had pulled out a sword and defended himself. Anybody standing around there, they would go, that's what you do, right? When you get attacked, you defend yourself. Well, let's go on a little further. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Somebody came prepared, right? They weren't oblivious to this mounting tension and that things were on edge and getting serious. I would love to know who that was. Was it somebody we never heard about yet that brought the sword? Was it Peter, who just a little while ago said, I'm ready to die? And was he so sure in that conviction, he strapped on a sword? We don't know that, but we know somebody did. So even though they didn't need Judas, they're going through this formality. They're at least trying to look honorable. We would never do this, right? They're at least trying to look honorable when they're acting less than honorable. So right now, is Judas thinking he's getting his wish? The sword is drawn, the revolution begins. This is about overthrowing the authority, and that makes us justified in using violence. Right? I mean, these are all Jewish men who've grown up hearing the law. They would have known the 10 Commandments. Can you think? I'm going to ask an absurd question because of course you can. Can you think of one of the laws that might come into play here?
No, not for now.
Thou shalt not kill. Right? They would know that. But it's easy to think, well, because of the cause, because of the purpose, because of our intent, it's going to be okay to not do that. And I think there are times that that's appropriate. You know, if Jim's going to a fire, I don't want him to drive the speed limit. I want him to get there as quick as he can, right? If I fall over and you call an ambulance, let him speed. Right? I get that. But the use of violence to do that is a great question. Jeff?
Yeah, because of John 6:64, I've always kind of viewed Judas as never having believed in the Messiah, believed in Jesus, because John 6:64 is really, it's John, and it's only in John. But John 6:64 says, yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him.
Right.
So I've always kind of viewed Judas as never really being on board.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm not trying to paint Judas as a nice guy.
I just always believed he didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. But once again, it's the only verse.
Right. Well, and probably we would talk about what we mean by Messiah there. As the Holy One sent from God, I'm with you. If we use Messiah as they're thinking this is our ticket to overthrow the Romans, I think that's the way he perhaps thought about it. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he ever got it, even though he spent all this time with Jesus. Kind of shoots our philosophy. Well, if I'd been there in Bible times, my faith would... They were there right with him. They saw all the things happen, and yet they still struggled with that.
Jesus knew who was going to betray him. He let Jesus know that he knew. I
Yeah.
Why would he just go through with the whole thing, and knowing that Jesus already knew what was going on?
That's why for me, it makes sense that he thought Jesus needed some help getting this revolution started. It helps me humanize him to say he had a purpose in doing what he did, because why wouldn't he just leave, right? If he's discouraged, why is he even sticking around? Why is he willing to do this? And then his reaction after it's over, right? We'll get to that. When he's despondent after it all happens and Jesus is killed, that kind of reaction to me appears to be that's not what he intended to have happen. And again, we don't know that for sure, but I hope this exercise allows you to go, man, what would I have done if I'd been there? How would I have acted when all these extraordinary things were going on? And for me to think I would have navigated that cleanly, nicely, I would just make the right decisions. I don't think that's very fair to them, and it's certainly not fair to us operating out of hindsight. Andy.
Wonder, like, what effect the Maccabean revolt had on the people. Because, you know, when you had, what's it, 100 years before, you had a rebellion from an old priest and his family. They actually were in power for a while until infighting between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And, well, Jonathan's attempts to be king and priest,
Right.
you know, talk about a confusing time. I mean, that must have been a strange thing until one of the parties invited the Romans in.
Right. That's where Herod became puppet king, right, eventually. I think that's an excellent point. I'm glad today we don't get swept up with strange ideas and far-fetched solutions for how to fix everything. No, they were having that trouble then. We still have it now. Let's add just a little bit to that, because Andy, I think it's going to go right to what you're saying. Notice what Jesus says in verse 48. Then Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were the New Revised Standard says bandit." What does your version say? Robber. Anybody else?
Am I leading a rebellion?
Am I leading a rebellion? The NET uses outlaw, but I looked into that word, and when they use that word outlaw, bandit, robber, it's not in our sense of people taking other things, but it's in the sense of a revolutionary, of someone that's going to lead a revolution. So it's somebody not coming in to steal stuff, but somebody who's outside the law, an outlaw that's going to be rebellious to the way things are. Wasn't that what they were expecting? Even his disciples? But at this moment, when he says, "Are you coming at me like I'm a revolutionary? That I'm going to lead a rebellion?" That you thought you had there been any violence with Jesus up until this point? I mean, did they have any, if everywhere he went, people were dying and he was leading armed conflict? Yeah, but he said, what evidence do you have, basically? And so I think it's this moment that his disciples realize, when he simply does not fight back, that their expectations of what the Messiah is going to be like will not be met. It's just not going to happen. that this is the kind of sacrificial death he had in mind. Going quietly when they were thinking, as we would say it, guns a-blazing, right? His response, 49, day after day I was with you in the temple, of all places, teaching, and you did not arrest me? But let the scriptures be fulfilled. All of them deserted him and fled. Last week he said the sheep going to be scattered. Now he's saying, remember what I said. It's not just Judas, but it certainly is. Judas had his part. Now here's the curious one, and you can chase this on your own. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. Why? I don't know. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran off naked. Okay, you're not going to answer who this was. A lot of people, for sure, have fun speculating why this is in here, why Mark would write about it. A lot of people think it was because it was Mark, right? It probably referred to him. But why was he wearing only an outer garment and not his tunic as well? Okay, I'm open. You explain that to me. Was he in a hurry? Did his mother not dress him that morning? I don't know what it was. And I think part of the emphasis by Mark mentioning it, whether it's him or not, is that they all fled, right? There's this guy just wearing a coat and he ran off naked. So there's a guy you might know about. His name's N.T. Wright. He's a famous theologian. He says Mark, in writing about this, is trying to connect us back to Genesis 3 in the garden. Where were they at? They were in a garden. And what does this nakedness and running and fleeing, what does that tie into Genesis 3? Well, the shame.
Certainly helps you remember the story.
It's vivid. It helps you remember. But he's tying into the shame that's been with men ever since the things that happened in the garden. And here's Jesus again in a garden and in the presence of God, men feeling shame for their action, for their behavior. Could there be a better place for the presence of God? I get shame. It has its momentary place and helping us. But Jesus came to take that shame away, right? So no better place for this to happen, and also attach itself to the Old Testament story. So here's what I want you to think about for a moment. Let's pretend that was Mark, and he's now included this thing happening to him, which, your mama would say, don't talk about those kind of things, right? Don't let people know those things happen. We all have those events, if we stepped up to the microphone that you would not want to be talking about. But here is Mark, perhaps, having talked about it. So if you had been there in the garden, here's the idea. How would you have told the story? What kind of things come out at you? And Mark's writing now has a benefit of time to look back and reflect. If he had written closer to the event, maybe he wouldn't have mentioned that. But now that he understands better what Jesus was doing, Is it okay to mention? Would we be worried about the optics of our behavior and how it looked? Not so much about what it was, but how it would look to others. And in doing so, we're missing the most important thing, right, at the moment. It's really not what the disciples were doing or what they didn't do, right? Whichever way you want to talk about that. They didn't stand up for their teacher or they ran away. Whichever way you want to talk about that. Sometimes we talk about that a lot. You know, that was bad, shameful behavior. I'm not saying it wasn't, but we're really missing the better picture, right? Even in the midst of all our chaos and all our mistakes and our inability to see what God is doing, God is still doing what he came to do, right? It's not because of their behavior that Jesus is doing the things he's doing. This is what he came to do. And so let's don't miss that despite all the other things going on, drawing the sword, cutting off an ear, everybody deserting him, he knows what he's about and he knows what he has to do. So let's pick up in verse 53. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, the scribes were assembled. They got all of them, right? Let's get this settled once and for all. I don't know if you've ever had any church meetings like that, but they happen. We're going to get this straightened out. Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. So again, let's switch from thinking about Judas to thinking about Peter. You would think Peter's not going to think about what he had said only after the rooster crows. He's got to be thinking about it now. He doesn't run away, but as you know this part of the story. He's not going to own up to what's happening. Verse 55. So let's go back to 54. Peter had fallen him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. Just let that hang there for a second. You know that, but just experience that. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. So they didn't lack people making stuff up, but unfortunately they hadn't got them together and made sure everybody was on the same page about what they were going to say. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But he was silent and did not answer. He didn't answer the charges of what people were trying to make up and testify against. You know, sometimes things are just so ludicrous you don't even respond, right? Okay, what? But notice the next question. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am." He looked the Jews in the face and said, "I'm the one you've been looking for. I am." you will see the Son of Man, and that's a code word for Messiah, seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Both images of how the Messiah would be. So, all of Mark, we've been talking about who do different people say Jesus is. Started with the Father himself saying, "This is my Son." Then we moved to the demons, and we've moved to others. Even to the woman who brought the perfume and anointed him for burial, right? They were announcing. And now Jesus, directly to the Jews in a way maybe he's not done yet, he says, "Yes, it's me." So they're inside this Jewish council, and Jesus says, "I'm the one you're looking for." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard this blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him over and beat him. So he says he's the prophet they're looking for. They accuse him of being false prophet, right? So now that's inside. Let's step outside for a moment. We're going to contrast what's going inside with what's going on outside. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. And when he saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, I don't know or understand what you're talking about. Let that sink in for a moment. Was he telling the truth? One way to look at it, it was a flat out lie. I do know him. Or if we had continued talking to Peter, would he have said, "I thought I knew him, but I don't know him because this is not what I was expecting"? Perhaps. Was Peter just saying, "No, that's not, I was duped. I thought this was something that it's not"? And he went out into the forecourt. Probably most of your texts say, "Then the cock crowed," right? That would be number one. Actually, this is a tough one. Some early manuscripts have this, and some also very good early manuscripts do not have this. But you don't have to have Mark counting the number of times the rooster crows in order for the story to flow. Just an interesting side. This is one of those rare occasions where there's strong evidence both ways. Good manuscripts. But I think 70 is the real force. But again, he denied it. And then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are Galilean." How would they know? They just hear him talk, right? They would know he's Galilean. Probably the way he's dressed too, perhaps. Fishermen probably dress different than city folk, you would think. But he began to curse and swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." Maybe lie, maybe he's just saying, I don't know. At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept.
I like John's recount
Yeah?
a little bit better because John actually says the third person who accuses him of knowing Jesus is Malchus's relative.
Yeah,
who was there when Peter cut his ear off.
yeah,
So it kind of keeps getting worse for Peter. Servant girl, then one who could pick out his accent, and then the third person is like, I saw you cut Malcolm's ear off. So the lie kind of gets worse and worse for
Yeah.
John's recount.
yeah, yeah. Peter, I wouldn't want to be any of them, but Judas and Peter, but let's tie the inside and outside together. Inside the room, they were accusing him of being a false prophet. What was Peter realizing outside the room? He knew what he was talking about. What he had told him just a little while ago was actually happening. Inside the room, the Son of God was saying, yes, I am the Son of God. That's the blasphemy. And outside the room, I just like these contrasts. I think Mark is highlighting these on purpose. Outside the room, the one who back in chapter 8 said, you are the Christ, is doing what? Denying him. Inside the room, Jesus is affirming his identity. Outside the room, Peter is wondering. Peter is now at a different place, oblivious to his former confession. And that's really is the challenge, to put ourselves in Peter's sandals. And where we thought we saw strength in a certain way, was he looking on Jesus now being weak? Did he feel the pressure, the menacing crowd? He couldn't stand up and admit what he had done just days before. And it calls into question for all of the apostles, will you still put your trust in this Messiah? Do we ever get challenged in that way? When nothing seems to be working, when everything's going on wrong, when things we thought were a certain way get turned upside down, when we do things the right way and we do good things, but yet bad things happen. The challenge hadn't gone away, has it?
Now, you know, I look at Peter, he denied Jesus 3 times, but was he not denying himself to save his own hide? Because
Right.
he knew Jesus was going to be crucified, and if he said that he did know him, he was going to be crucified right beside him.
Yeah. How many times have we saved our own hide? Right? I can't. I could certainly put myself in Peter's place and understand, and I don't want to go, oh, I would have done it way different.
I mean, I don't want to say why Judas didn't try to save his hide at the same time.
Right?
He went on through with what he was doing.
He did. Does that give you enough to think about this week? The challenge is me to think about, am I putting my trust where I say I'm putting my trust? We'll pick up some more next week.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for the comments. It's good discussion. Glad we moved the microphone.